What is the core importance of sleep for the human brain and body?
I think here's the main crux of it all. Sleep is recovery. Drop the mic, right? That's what we're talking about here. Recovery from a whole host of different things. It could be physiological recovery. It could be spiritual recovery. It could be emotional recovery. Like there's all kinds of things that happen when we sleep.
Dr. Michael Breus is a diplomate of the American Board of Sleep Medicine and a fellow of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. He is one of only 168 psychologists to pass the Sleep Medical Specialty Board without going to medical school. And he's the author of his new book, Sleep, Drink, Breathe, Wellness is Too Complicated.
The three most fundamental aspects of the human existence are sleeping, drinking water, and breathing. That's what makes the whole thing move forward.
He's taught lectures and been featured on shows like Today, Dr. Oz, and Oprah.
Could you possibly have an undiagnosed sleep disorder? Because if there's underlying, let's say, obstructive sleep apnea as an example, we have to full stop and we have to fix that first, because by the way, that could actually make the tinnitus a little bit better, actually significantly better. So there is data to show that if you have an undiagnosed sleep disorder and you have a lot of sleep deprivation, that you notice the ringing more. The very first thing I like to talk about with people is, number one, could you possibly have an undiagnosed sleep disorder, right? So there is data to show that if you have an undiagnosed sleep disorder and you have a lot of sleep deprivation, that you notice the ringing more. Let's try to do a sleep study and see. Because if there's underlying, let's say, obstructive sleep apnea as an example, that we have to full stop and we have to fix that first, because by the way, that could actually make the tinnitus a little bit better, actually significantly better, because what ends up happening is you get into a deeper sleep, right? And you're able to fall asleep more easily. And so full stop, step number one, if you think there's a universe out there where you could have a sleep disorder, then you should probably get tested.
Dr. Michael Breus is a diplomate of the American Board of Sleep Medicine and a fellow of the American Academy of Sleep Medicine. He's taught lectures and been featured on shows like Today, Dr. Oz, and Oprah, as well as 14 years as the sleep expert on WebMD. And he's the author of his new book, Sleep, Drink, Breathe, Wellness is Too Complicated. Dr. Breus, welcome to the Treble Health Podcast. There's a few things I want to highlight here. Number one is the problem ringing in the ears. Hissing, ringing, one ear, both ears, center of the head. It most commonly affects people when they're in quiet environments.
Right.
So let's put ourselves in those shoes. I'm trying to relax. I'm trying to settle my nervous system. If I'm trying to read and relax on my couch, the tinnitus is there. It's very loud.
Right.
If I'm trying to go to sleep at night, sleep is generally quiet. Now, people do use sound machines, and that's a pretty normal thing. But most people sleep in a quiet space. So
we recommend it. Like, as the sleep community, we tell people it needs to be quiet, it needs to be dark, it needs to be cool. Like, how is that supposed to work for somebody with tinnitus? Like, that's actually that environment, I think, would probably make it worse.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the nuances with tinnitus are that there's this sound. So using something called sound therapy, I would say, is the sort of extra variable that could go on top of all of the great sleep science that's out there.
For sure.
So I'd love to just get your perspective of, when you think of basic 2 or 3 tips for someone who hasn't tried anything for sleep but is really struggling with it, where do you normally go? I want to get people's gears turning, not from just I'm listening to this podcast, but maybe I can start implementing some things in my actual, nightly routine.
Absolutely. So the very first thing I like to talk about with people is, number one, could you possibly have an undiagnosed sleep disorder, right? So there is data to show that if you have an undiagnosed sleep disorder and you have a lot of sleep deprivation, that you notice the ringing more. It is much more prevalent, you are much more aware of it, and it has a much greater effect from an anxiety perspective, depression perspective, physiological arousal perspective. And so the very first thing I talk to with all of my tinnitus patients, and to be clear, it's not like I have a ton of you guys out there. I've seen probably maybe 2 to 3 a year over the course of my career, which might be more than most people. The very first thing I want to do is say, hey, could you possibly have a sleep disorder? Let's try to do a sleep study and see. Because if there's underlying, let's say, obstructive sleep apnea as an example, that we have to full stop and we have to fix that first, because by the way, that could actually make the tinnitus a little bit better, actually significantly better, because what ends up happening is you get into a deeper sleep. right? And you're able to fall asleep more easily. And so full stop, step number one, if you think there's a universe out there where you could have a sleep disorder, then you should probably get tested. I think step number two has to do with environment, right? And so what is your environment? And is it conducive to sleep with tinnitus? And I think that with tinnitus is really the aspect that we need to be thoughtful of here. So I want to full stop here. What happens in my house? So my house is a little different. We have a lot of crazy things going on in my house. We have 2 French bulldogs in our bed. We have a television that's on all night long. It's a big screen TV, and it's the only way my wife can fall asleep. So people can adapt to many different environments. So that recommendation that comes across like, oh, it needs to be quiet, dark, and cool. Well, it might be for some people, but to be fair, the quieter it is, the more difficult it's probably going to be for you guys. So I would argue that the quiet part probably needs to go away, and we need to think through some different idea sets here. Now, here's what's interesting. Let's say you have tinnitus, but your bed partner doesn't. Aha! And they want to sleep in the quiet, but you need something going on for you. How do we deal with a situation like this? So, interestingly enough, and I had no association with these companies, there's a new company out that has earbuds that you actually sleep with. They're designed to be slept in, that has music and things like that. Now, to be fair, it's not a tinnitus treatment.
I've tested some of those actually for tinnitus over the years. Like product review.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I know that Bose came out with that product years ago,
Right.
and I think there's been other new companies.
So I'll tell you what happened. So Bose came out with it. They had battery problems. And then the group that was at Bose peeled off of Bose. They fixed the battery problems. And now they've got the device, which is actually kind of cool. My assistant uses it every night because her husband snores and it keeps her from listening to him. So that's one thing. Also, pillow speakers are things that people can get. A lot of people don't know this. And they're very inexpensive. I mean, they're $30 for a pillow speaker, and you can have it clicked into your phone. You can be listening, not bothering your bed partner at all. Also, there are now eye masks that have built-in speakers with Bluetooth. Like, there's a lot of different ways and shapes and forms that you can do this and still be able to get some level of sleep without total disruption to your bed partner. And that's one way of changing your environment. I will also tell people that if you're not comfortable, you start to notice everything, right? So I don't know about you, but like when I'm too hot, I don't just notice that I'm too hot. I notice everything that's a problem in the room, right? And so you have to really, temperature turns out to be a really, really big factor for sleep. In fact, most people don't know this, but sleep follows the core body temperature cycle. And so the way sleep basically works is your core body temperature rises, and it gets to a point where it peaks. And then when it drops, that's a signal to your brain to release melatonin, which is kind of that key that starts the engine for sleep. Then what happens is your core body temperature drops throughout the night. At some point around 1 o'clock in the morning, it's supposed to rise. And by the way, that's the time that every person on Earth wakes up. Now, a lot of your listeners are going to be like, hey, wait a second, what did he say? Everybody wakes up between 1 and 3 in the morning, okay? That's because your core body temperature is rising, and so you're immediately going into a lighter stage of sleep. However, 95% of people just roll over and fall back to sleep and don't even remember it. What happens with my tinnitus patients is there's the problem, right? They finally figured out how to get to sleep, and now they woke up and now they're worried, oh gosh, am I going to fall back asleep? Heart rate goes up, and now we're in anxiety world. We're not in go back to sleep world, right?
Yeah.
So there's a few different things that I think people can utilize. So I'm finally getting to the point of what can people actually do in the middle of the night. So one of my favorite techniques is called 4-7-8 breathing. I want to explain why it's one of my favorite, and I want to get your opinion, Ben, if you think this would make sense into this world, because I haven't tried it, but I think it would work well. And so 4-7-8 breathing was developed by Dr. Andrew Weil, and it's exactly what it says. You slowly breathe in for a count of 4, you hold for a count of 7, and you breathe out for a count of 8. The biology on this is quite interesting, but basically what it's forcing you to do is take much deeper breaths in and then expelling air out. And what that does is it uses the total lung, and then your heart doesn't have to beat as fast. So when you're a shallow breather and you're only using half your lung was built to be used entirely because that's how much oxygen needs to be exchanged in the body. When you're breathing lightly and you only have half of your lung, your heart has to beat twice as fast. Now, you might be wondering, Michael, you're explaining a lot of biology here. Who cares? Like, what's going on? In order to enter into a state of unconsciousness, you need a heart rate of 60 or below. That's the key finding here. So 4-7-8 breathing does an amazing job after 10 to 12 cycles of dumping your heart rate because you're using the entire lung. So your heart has to work half as hard. And so your heart rate begins to drop. That's number one. And what that does, by the way, is it lowers your anxiety. Guess what? Most people with tinnitus have got a significant amount of anxiety, especially when they wake up at 3 o'clock in the freaking morning and they have to go back to sleep. So we're lowering anxiety by doing this gas exchange and lowering your heart rate. But we're also doing something else that's important, is we're counting. And while you're counting, you can't think of anything else. So you can't think, oh, my ears are ringing. Oh, this is annoying. Oh, all of these different things. And by having that level of distraction while lowering your heart rate through this gas exchange of 4-7-8 breathing, the natural sleep process now has the ability to come back in and take over. And your anxiety, what's going on in your head, doesn't necessarily have that ability because you've been pushing it away by counting and breathing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Let's touch on some of the physiology. So tinnitus really connects to the psychological brain, the limbic system, as it's called, which is designed to, among other things, recognize potential threats or dangers.
Absolutely. Fight or flight.
It categorizes that tinnitus sound as an alarm bell or something of that degree. This internal sound, brain is categorizing as something potentially dangerous or threatening. Then there's the nervous system, which I think most people have heard, but few really understand. And I've gotten the chance to understand it better over the years, where there's a part of our nervous system where we're usually in, being active and in a sort of activated state. And there's a very calm, soothing part of our nervous system. The parasympathetic is called, would be that calming part. What I've found is that whether patients with tinnitus are either understanding the science and going into it, or they're simply doing the practices like the guided breathing and things that settle the mind and settle the nervous system, they're often reporting, hey, I'm experiencing some relief. It's not as intrusive. The sound's pushing more to the background. I'm falling asleep more easily when I start to implement the nightly breathing. So all these systems interplay, and given that you're a PhD in clinical psychology, this is so key, right, for treatment of tinnitus as well as chronic pain and insomnia. Do you want to touch on some of that? If you have tinnitus ringing in the ears and want to speak to a doctor like me, click the link right here to book a free call with Treble Health. A doctor from my team will be able to speak with you, review your case, and provide next steps towards the solution that can get you relief, better sleep, and bring the tinnitus levels down over time. Just click that link right there on the screen, book a free call today. Now, back to our podcast.
Here's what's crazy. I wish somebody had taught me about breathwork in graduate school. Do you know how many people I could have helped in the last 20 years in the world of sleep if I had had just one course on meditation and breathwork during graduate school? But I went to a clinical psychology program that was cognitive behaviorally based. We just did cognitive behavior therapy on everybody. And, we didn't really care why the problem happened. We're just going to fix the problem. I'm not suggesting that that's a bad route to take, but you should combine different types of therapies because tinnitus is a very unique situation that I think a lot of people could gain, value from by combining some of these idea sets.
Yeah. Talk to us about that. Number one, for people who are curious, what is breath work in its simplest form? Let's start there.
Yeah. So when I say something like breath work, it sounds like a very amorphous term, okay? All we're talking about here is changing the rate at which you breathe or the number of times that you're breathing, right? And there's different ways to do this. Now, I want to be super duper clear. I did not invent breathwork. Breathwork has been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. If you go into the yogi sort of world, you go into meditation, you go into Buddhism, Hinduism, all of these different things, they all talk about how to control your body merely with breathing. And so that's really conceptually the idea set behind breathwork. Now, let's break it down into something that's more realistic for all of us, right? So as an example, that 4-7-8 breathing I was just talking to you about, I do that personally, not just if I wake up in the middle of the night, which can happen on occasion, but right before I go on stage for a big lecture. Why? I only do 4 or 5 cycles. It lowers my heart rate, gets me calm, makes me thinking. Then I put my game face on and I'm out in front of the audience, right? So that's a great use of breath work. So it's a bit of a reframe here for people, but using breathing in unique ways has been shown, and the data is really solid on this, to lower anxiety, to lower depression, to give you energy. Like it can go in either direction that you want it to. You can increase your heart rate in breath work and give yourself energy, or you can decrease your heart rate in breath work and give yourself calm. That's what you're talking about when you talk about the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system.
On your new book, Sleep, Drink, Breathe, Wellness is Too Complicated, I thought it'd be fun to go through some sort of lightning round questions together.
Fire away.
To make it simple. Now we're starting to wonder, is it the sleep or is it the tinnitus and other sleep issues? We can now learn that it's more nuanced. Okay, question number 1.
Sure.
I'm struggling to fall asleep because of the tinnitus.
So my first question is, are you going to bed at the right time for you? So everybody, like for example, some people are early birds, some people are night owls. But people say, well, I got to get up early, even though I know I'm a night owl, so they go to bed early and their body isn't ready to sleep. So one of the first things I would say is you want to learn what something is called your chronotype, and that might help you figure out your timing better. And then you have a far greater likelihood of falling asleep because your body's ready.
Okay, question number 2. I wake up in the middle of the night and I have a hard time going back to sleep.
This is where 4-7-8 breathing is my go-to. Now, I will be honest with you, there's 2 other things that I talked about people in the middle of the night. So number 1, don't go pee. You heard that correctly, don't go pee. Now, I want to be very, very clear. If you wake up in the middle of the night and your bladder's about to burst, please get your butt out of bed and go pee. But what a lot of people do is they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're like, well, I'm up. I might as well go pee. Here's the problem. Remember, we want a heart rate of 60 or below. So what happens when you're lying down and you sit up and you stand and you walk across the room? Guess what? Your heart rate goes up. So if you don't actually have to go to the bathroom, don't go. I want to be clear. You got to pee. Please go pee. The other big thing that a lot of people do, which is really a bad idea, is they look at the clock. Okay? Then they instantly do the mental math and then they say, oh no, it's 3:30 in the morning. I've got to be up at 6. Sleep, sleep, sleep. And they try to force themselves to sleep. Energetically speaking, heart rate, anxiety, that's going up, not down, right? Which is the direction that we want to go in. So looking at the clock is really a bad idea because it provokes anxiety. I'm going to be honest with you, dude. Everybody looks at the clock. I wish they didn't, but they do. So if people can do something like have the clock across the room, turn it around, whatever you need to do, if you can avoid those 2 things, I think that would be helpful. Then you do the 4-7-8 breathing after you've woken up. Then, and by the way, it takes 10 to 12 cycles of 4-7-8 breathing. You can't just do it a couple of times and knock off. 10 to 12 cycles, and you need to be lying, relaxing. And then from that point forward, you can just kind of let the natural sleep take over. I know my brain will say things like, Michael, you can't fall back asleep and you're going to be on television tomorrow. You're going to look like an idiot, right? I can't listen to that kind of stuff. I have to just say to myself, okay, I woke up and guess what? I have to be on TV tomorrow and it looks like I might not be falling back asleep. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do yoga nidra. So what is yoga nidra for folks out there that don't know? This is lying in the dark, on your back, in the quiet, just relaxing. Believe it or not, that's rejuvenative. Now, I got to be honest with you. I was skeptical, so I kind of looked at the studies. About an hour of yoga nidra is worth about 20 minutes of sleep. So let's say you wake up at 3:30 and you can't fall back to sleep. As long as you're not just getting crazy anxiety, try some yoga nidra. Try my 4-7-8 breathing. Again, it's not mine, by the way. It was developed by Dr. Andrew Weil. These are the techniques that I think people can utilize in the middle of the night because at the end of the day, this is an experience you've had quite a bit. And if you can get to a level of acceptance, everything else gets much easier. It's like, okay, I'm up. That's okay, I'm up. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to practice that breathing that crazy sleep doctor guy was talking about on Ben's show. And let's see what happens. And now you become a master at breathing in the middle of the night. And guess what? Now you start to feel a little bit better. And eventually you start to fall back asleep and your anxiety goes down and all those wonderful things.
And something that we commonly share with patients as well is the technique of don't associate your bed with restlessness. If it's been 15 or 20 minutes, go to a different room, sit in a chair. What are your thoughts about that? Is that recommended?
So I'm going to be honest with you. I think there's pros and cons in different directions there. So here's what I would tell you is don't do that at first. See if you can lie there and do the yoga nidra. See if you can do the 4-7-8 breathing. If you get through 30 minutes of doing that and you're getting angry, get up and get out of bed. But if you're lying there and you're perfectly comfortable and you're just kind of chilling out, it's fine to stay right there. So I think there's a point in time where you need to think about for yourself, am I getting upset lying here? And if you are, absolutely, positively, it's time to get up and go into another room. Now, if you're going to get up and go into another room, there's a couple of different strategies here. I have some patients that tell me if they just go straight to their guest room and close their eyes, boom, they're out like a light. You could give it a shot. I'm not sure why that works, but it does seem to work for several people out there. What a lot of people will do is they'll go into another room, and unfortunately, they'll flip on the TV or they'll flip on some lights, and they'll start reading or something along those lines. You want to try to do things that are not stimulating, but more relaxing focused, right? And so don't turn on the news as an example, because there's nothing relaxing about the news. But you could have, for example, a podcast that you want to listen to that may not be of great interest, like something that's a little bit on the boring side, but could be something, a fictional story or something like that. What I do tell people a lot of times is nonfiction in the middle of the night is a terrible idea, because it's usually self-reflective. Like I'm reading about my finances. You really don't want to try to go back to sleep after you're thinking about your finances.
They certainly keep me up at night, right? Sometimes. Come on, come on. All right. I wanted to introduce this framework that I think helps a lot of patients understand what they can do for sleep with tinnitus. There's a device component, and then there's a behavior change component.
Agreed.
So on the device component, we use sound to provide relief from the sound of our tinnitus. So a sound machine next to the bed, a sleep headband with little speakers inside
I love it.
inside of the ears. Those are the tools that we have at Treble Health, and those work very well for a lot of our patients.
I think it's fantastic.
Yeah. Additionally, there are buds that go in the ears that you can sleep with now. There are sound pillows. So there's also the actual type of sound that you use, where there's certain sounds that are
Yeah, let's talk about that.
more relaxing than others. And in the world of tinnitus, I'm not sure if you know, Michael, but one of the primary treatments for tinnitus to help reduce it over time is using what's called sound therapy during daytime hours, typically presented through hearing devices like hearing aids or other devices on the ears. So we're also using sound in the evening. There are some nuances here. Patients love to learn about it. What's your opinion? Maybe some research on if sound has been used for a population and how that affects their sleep.
Oh, sound has been used for eons to help people sleep. Music in particular, but white noise, brown noise, pink noise, purple noise, I think, green noise. There's all kinds of it out there. And what they do is they look at the frequency. So for example, white noise is just a completely open frequency where every single channel is wide open. Brown noise is one half, pink noise is another, green is another, and they give these sections. Now, what's interesting is that there's different these color noises appear to have different behavioral effects on people. Some things make people feel relaxed, some people make people feel excited. So there are different kinds of things that I think go along with the different types of noises. To be fair, I don't know which one works best for tinnitus. I will tell you that when somebody asks me about the different types of noises, what I tell them to do is I tell them to experiment and see which ones they find to be most relaxing. I personally like green noise because it feels very nature focused, and nature is one of those areas for me that's super duper relaxing. While I have some patients who prefer things that sound more like an ocean sound, like the crashing of the waves, and that seems to be more relaxing for them. So I try to get people to try the different types to see. Have you noticed that there's any particular type of noise that works well with your population?
Yeah, this is a lot of what we do with sound. And here's my tips for a simple sound machining in the evening. A tip that someone might not think of is it's best to have a sound machine that has specific sounds inside of it. It's best to have it not rely on Bluetooth from your phone. And here's why, because the sort of like the notifications, if you have notifications on, the battery life, it all sort of puts our attention on the sound. But if you have a sound machine that works independently from your phone, then you can just plug it in next to your bed, keep it in your bedroom, probably turn it on even before you enter your bedroom for sleep.
Yeah, I like that idea.
And it can just really normalize the whole thing. In terms of the specific sound, pink noise, white noise, probably the most common. Surprisingly, for the high-pitched tone of most people's tinnitus, we've released 10-hour soundtracks of specific cricket noises.
Awesome.
They're actually cicadas, by the way. We say crickets, but they're actually cicadas. And they sort of create this frequency modulating effect that people describe it like, wow, it's almost like you can itch it's like an unscratchable itch that now you're able to touch with this sound. So cricket sounds for tinnitus at night, definitely folks should try that, as well as noise or pink noise or white noise.
That's super cool. That's super cool.
I'd love to hear, who do you think is a great fit to check out your new book, Sleep, Drink, Breathe, Wellness is Too Complicated?
So I think anybody who's about to kind of start their wellness journey or who's just confused. I mean, I got to be honest with you, bro. Like, it's crazy. Like, people come up to me, they're like, should I have a green drink? Should I buy a sauna? I'm like, I don't know. Why don't you try some water? You know, it's like, come on. Like, people are getting way too into this stuff. Like, I just want people to start at the basics. So sleep, drink, breathe is really, I call it the starting line, right? It's, if you want to figure out your health and you don't want to get hyper complicated, these are 3 things you have to do anyway. You might as well do them really well, because that gets you so much further down the road than adding ashwagandha, which you're not going to remember to take half the time, you know, to begin with. So I think that is the group of people that would find the book interesting. And again, the goal here is it's radically simple. Like, I'm not explaining crazy, you know, intricacies of gas exchange. I'm saying breathe here, don't breathe here, use your right nostril, use your left, you know, stuff like that. So it's very tactical. And so far, people love it. People have been like, oh, this is so easy to do, Michael. And I didn't even realize I was breathing wrong. And now all of a sudden I'm breathing better and I feel better. So I think, yeah, that's kind of the goal.
I love that. And a lot of our community here are in their 40s, 50s, 60s,
Perfect.
and they develop tinnitus and they realize, wait, I've been healthy my whole life, and this thing has
Right.
sort of really impacted
Oh,
me,
it's
and I
devastating.
can't, and I'm having a hard time fixing it on my own. Then they start to put some tools that we recommend, and they do get better, and they're often learning some of these fundamentals for health and wellness. So I think what you just said is perfect, where for someone in that, you know, in that group who wants to take the next step in their wellness journey of actually be proactive and be in a better place, not just, you know, heal a wound, but be in a better place. I think your book is a great resource. So anything else you'd like to share with our community, Dr. Michael Breus?
Yeah, if people want to learn more about me, you can head on over to thesleepdoctor.com. I mean, I got a YouTube channel, I got a website, I got every social media thing you could possibly imagine. And if you want to learn about your chronotype, that's kind of the thing I'm most famous for, go to chronoquiz.com, or it's on my website, and you'll learn a lot. You'll learn about being an early bird, night owl, all those kind of fun things. So I think you'll have a good time. But I just want to wish everybody sweet dreams. And I want to say, like, I love the fact that this is a podcast about tinnitus, because that's what we need. And to be honest with you, dude, like, I want to get your information afterwards, because I think I got some patients I want to send.
Hey, it's Dr. Ben Thompson with Treble Health. If you'd like to book a free consultation with a doctor from my team, all you have to do is click the link on the screen right there. Your brain health is important, your hearing is important, and tinnitus is treatable. So reach out to us right here to create a personalized plan for your treatment. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next video.